Göbekli Tepe was a game changer, but I think it's a game changer for everything, because Göbekli Tepe, the extraordinary nature of it, we're looking at a major megalithic site, which is at least 5,500 years old.
It was certainly used during Christian times, but there's also evidence that there's prehistoric activity going on.
At the top of a windswept plateau in southeastern Turkey, carved into the limestone bedrock over 11,000 years ago, stand the towering T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe. For decades, archaeologists and historians have marveled at the intricate animal figures, abstract patterns, and enigmatic signs etched into those stones. Until now, their true purpose and meaning have remained locked away in silence, leaving scholars to speculate endlessly. But the recent application of advanced artificial intelligence to the carvings has shifted the entire conversation. The symbols, once believed to be abstract ritual art, have been decoded with startling precision, and the revelations are shaking the foundations of what we thought we knew about humanity's earliest monumental site. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The AI system was not trained merely on language. It was trained on patterns, symbolism, cross-cultural iconography, and statistical correlations between ancient semiotics across continents. Instead of reading the carvings as art, the system interpreted them as a structured form of symbolic communication. The first shock came when the AI identified repeating sequences across multiple pillars, sequences that corresponded with astronomical cycles. The positioning of foxes, vultures, snakes, and even abstract H-shapes were not random decorations, but markers within a coded system that tracked celestial events. Göbekli Tepe, it appears, was not just a ritual gathering place, but a repository of encoded knowledge about the skies. The implications are profound. For generations, archaeology has worked on the assumption that writing systems developed thousands of years later in Mesopotamia. Yet here was an algorithm suggesting that long before cuneiform pressed into clay tablets, there existed a proto-script, a symbolic code capable of recording complex astronomical and possibly calendrical knowledge. This does not mean Göbekli Tepe had a writing system in the modern sense, but it does indicate that its builders developed a symbolic language to preserve vital information. That discovery alone disrupts the conventional timeline of civilization. The AI's analysis pushed further. When mapping the pillars in sequence, researchers found that the placement of certain animals correlated with constellations visible in the night sky of 9600 BCE. The vulture with outstretched wings was linked to the Cygnus constellation, while serpentine carvings aligned with Draco's winding path across the heavens. Even the peculiar headless human figures might represent precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, which would make Göbekli Tepe one of the earliest astronomical observatories known to humankind. This wasn't ritual without logic. It was data encoded in stone. If these interpretations hold true, then Göbekli Tepe is no longer simply a temple or a communal feasting site. It transforms into something far more advanced, a prehistoric library, a stone-bound codex in which the earliest humans inscribed their cosmological knowledge. The sheer intentionality behind such a project suggests an intellectual sophistication previously unimagined for the so-called hunter-gatherers of that era. They were not merely subsisting off the land. They were observing, recording, predicting, and embedding their understanding of the universe into a symbolic structure that could outlast generations. The decoding has also reshaped our understanding of human collaboration in that period. For such an undertaking to occur, hundreds of individuals would have needed to work in unison, not only in carving stone but in preserving and transmitting shared symbolic meanings. This points to a level of cultural cohesion that predates the urban settlements of Sumer, Egypt, or the Indus Valley. The people of Göbekli Tepe were not isolated groups. They were a network bound by shared cosmological narratives, converging to inscribe their worldview into stone. The event of AI's decoding did not simply solve one puzzle. It opened a door to many more. If Göbekli Tepe's carvings can be read as a form of proto-writing, then what of other megalithic sites across the globe? Could the spirals at Newgrange, the glyphs at Catalhoyuk, or the carvings at Stonehenge also be part of a forgotten symbolic lexicon? The AI suggests this is not only possible, but likely. By comparing motifs across cultures, The system found structural similarities in symbolic groupings, suggesting that early human societies may have shared a universal grammar of signs before the development of distinct regional scripts. What makes the revelation so startling is how it forces us to reconsider the nature of intelligence itself. Human beings 11,000 years ago, without the wheel, metallurgy, or domesticated agriculture as we define it, had already embarked on the encoding of abstract thought into durable symbolic systems. This is not the behavior of a species at the dawn of culture, but of one already deeply immersed in symbolic reasoning. The carvings of Göbekli Tepe, therefore, are not primitive doodles, but deliberate acts of communication that span millennia. The technology used to decode the site mirrors, in a sense, the ambitions of its builders. AI thrives on patterns, context, and the extraction of meaning from apparent chaos. The people of Göbekli Tepe were doing something similar, extracting order from the cosmos, mapping cycles of stars, encoding shifts of seasons, and rendering them into symbols comprehensible to their community. In that parallel, we see a reflection of continuity, an ancient intelligence meeting a modern one, separated by 11,000 years but linked by the pursuit of understanding. The revelation has reignited debates about the origins of civilization. Was it truly agriculture that spurred humans to build monumental structures, as the traditional model suggests? Or could it have been the other way around, that the act of building places like Göbekli Tepe, tied to shared symbolic and astronomical systems, compelled groups to settle, organize, and eventually develop farming to sustain these gatherings? If the AI's decoding is correct, Göbekli Tepe suggests that ideas, not subsistence, were the true foundation of civilization. The human drive to encode and share knowledge may have preceded the plow. The site also hints at an extraordinary relationship between early humans and the cosmos. To encode constellations, solstices, and precession into stone implies not only careful observation, but also a worldview that placed cosmic order at the center of existence. The builders of Göbekli Tepe may have seen themselves as participants in a grand celestial drama, their monuments a way of harmonizing human life with the rhythms of the stars. This is not merely religion, but an integration of science, art, and spirituality into a unified symbolic system. AI's role in this discovery also raises profound questions about how we interpret the past. For centuries, human scholars have speculated about Göbekli Tepe's meaning, but it took a machine, free from cultural biases and trained to see patterns across millennia, to detect the code. Does this mean that many of humanity's deepest mysteries may only yield to artificial intelligence? Or does it remind us that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we often credit them for, and that the tools of the present are finally catching up to the minds of the past? The excitement surrounding the decoding lies not only in what was discovered, but also in the method itself. If AI can reconstruct symbolic lexicons from stone carvings, it may be applied to undeciphered scripts like Linear A, the Indus Valley symbols, or even the Rongorongo glyphs of Easter Island. Each of these holds potential secrets of human history that have long resisted interpretation. The success at Göbekli Tepe sets a precedent, suggesting that the silent stones scattered across the globe may not be silent after all. They may be speaking in a forgotten language that machines are just beginning to translate. At Göbekli Tepe, the pillars themselves stand like sentinels of deep time, their surfaces now newly legible. To walk among them with the knowledge that those carvings may represent constellations, seasonal cycles, and encoded myths is to experience a bridge across ages. It forces us to see the site not as a relic of an alien past, but as an archive of human thought, still resonant with meaning today. The decoding does not diminish the mystery, rather it transforms it into a living dialogue between past and present. The implications ripple outward to our understanding of human creativity. For millennia, humanity has assumed that literacy and symbolic abstraction arrived late, born of bureaucratic needs in early cities. But Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that abstraction, communication, and encoded systems of meaning may have been at the very root of what made us human. This is not the story of civilization's aftermath, but of its inception. The moment those symbols were carved into stone, humanity declared its intention to preserve memory, knowledge, and cosmology beyond the fleeting lives of individuals. To imagine the builders standing before those massive pillars, chisels in hand, shaping vultures, foxes, and serpents into symbolic codes is to recognize the continuity of the human mind. They, like us, sought permanence in impermanence, order in chaos, and meaning in mystery. With AI's decoding, their voices, though still distant, are now faintly audible. And in that echo, we do not simply learn about the past, we learn about ourselves, about the deep origins of communication, symbolism, and the unyielding human quest to understand the universe. The revelation of Göbekli Tepe's decoded symbols did not end with the confirmation of astronomical alignments or the recognition of proto-writing. As researchers pushed deeper into the findings supplied by artificial intelligence, another layer of meaning began to emerge, one that transcended simple celestial observation and moved into the realm of myth, cosmology, and the shaping of collective identity. The carvings were not simply about the stars above, they were also about the relationship between human beings and the natural and supernatural forces they perceived around them. What the AI unraveled was less a straightforward astronomical ledger, and more a tapestry of knowledge woven together from observation, narrative, and shared ritual meaning. One of the more surprising discoveries came when the AI cross-referenced Göbekli Tepe's symbols with mythological motifs recorded thousands of years later in Mesopotamian and Anatolian traditions. The vulture with extended wings, once thought to be a mere depiction of carrion birds common to the region, turned out to resemble motifs tied to soul flight in later cultures. The AI flagged these resonances not as coincidence, but as evidence of continuity across generations of symbolic thought. This suggests that Göbekli Tepe was not only encoding practical knowledge, but also serving as the foundation for a mythological system that would persist for millennia. The builders were, in effect, shaping the earliest mytho-scientific worldview of humankind. The carvings also revealed something striking about human-animal relationships in that era. The animals depicted, foxes, boars, aurochs, snakes, were not random selections from local fauna. The AI demonstrated statistical patterns linking their arrangement to archetypal categories: predators, tricksters, guardians, and mediators between worlds. These categories were later recognized in mythologies around the globe. What this implies is that Göbekli Tepe might represent one of the first times humans codified archetypes into enduring symbolic form, a precursor to the archetypal pantheons that later emerged in Bronze Age civilizations. The fact that AI detected such consistent structures indicates that the carvings were intentionally encoded with layered meanings that could communicate across time. Another dimension of the AI's findings was the discovery of hidden geometrical frameworks underlying the placement of pillars and carvings. When fed spatial data from site surveys, the algorithm detected ratios and alignments resembling sacred geometry found in later ancient cultures. Triangular relationships between certain pillars mirrored angles used in Egyptian pyramids and Greek temples, though separated by thousands of years. Whether by coincidence or by a shared human inclination towards certain mathematical relationships, Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that geometry was already being employed as a sacred organizing principle long before urban centers arose. This suggests that the earliest builders were already seeking harmony between form, symbol, and cosmic order. The cultural implications of these findings cannot be overstated. If Göbekli Tepe functioned as a locus where knowledge of the cosmos, archetypes of human identity, and sacred geometry converged, then it was more than a temple. It was an institution, a prototype of the later library, observatory, and university combined into a single monumental site. The AI's decoding forces us to reimagine these hunter-gatherer societies as sophisticated knowledge keepers who carved their worldview into stone to safeguard it against the erosion of memory. This changes how we think about the role of art itself. Art in Göbekli Tepe was not merely decorative, nor was it solely ritualistic. It was functional communication, an encoded system that bound together cosmology, society, and survival. The carvings may have carried information about seasonal cycles necessary for hunting migrations and plant gathering, but they also carried the weight of shared myths that reinforced social cohesion. By carving a fox or vulture, the builders were not just creating a picture, but embedding an entire cultural concept, one that spoke simultaneously to the practical and the spiritual. The AI's decoding also illuminated the role of ritual performance at Göbekli Tepe. By analyzing pillar placement and the orientation of carvings relative to each other, researchers discovered that the carvings created visual sequences visible only from specific vantage points. These alignments imply that the site was designed not just for static viewing, but for dynamic interaction. Processions, dances, or ritual gatherings in which the movement of participants through the site would reveal symbolic narratives step by step. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe may have been the world's first theater of myth, where stories of the cosmos were enacted in sacred stone settings under the stars. This performative dimension adds another layer to our understanding of human culture at that time. Performance, myth, astronomy, and symbolic communication merged at Göbekli Tepe to form a total cultural experience. Knowledge was not delivered through words on a page, but through communal ritual and visual codes inscribed into the very architecture of the site. AI's ability to detect the intentionality of these sequences has opened new pathways for archaeologists, who now see Göbekli Tepe as a living stage of knowledge transmission. One of the most provocative implications of this decoding is its challenge to the linear narrative of human progress. Traditionally, we have imagined pre-agricultural societies as lacking complexity, living primarily at the mercy of their environment. Yet the evidence from Göbekli Tepe suggests that complexity preceded agriculture. Symbolic systems, cosmological mapping, and collective institutions existed before farming settlements became the norm. This upends the assumption that material surplus alone gave rise to culture. Instead, it may have been cultural aspiration, the drive to encode and preserve knowledge, that laid the groundwork for material innovations. The AI findings also raise questions about memory and mortality. Several carvings, particularly the headless human figures and vultures, have long puzzled researchers. With AI's input, a pattern emerged. These symbols may represent an early system of mortuary cosmology, encoding beliefs about life after death and the transition of the soul. By linking these images with later mythologies, AI suggested that Göbekli Tepe was not just about observing stars, but about understanding the human condition in relation to cosmic cycles. Death, rebirth, and transformation were written into the stones as central truths of existence. This perspective reframes Göbekli Tepe as a site of existential inquiry. The builders were not simply carving animals. They were grappling with the greatest questions of all. Where did we come from? What happens when we die? And how do we fit into the vastness of the cosmos? That these questions were being asked and encoded in symbolic systems 11,000 years ago speaks to the continuity of human curiosity and the timelessness of philosophical thought. Artificial intelligence, by decoding these symbols, has also sparked reflection on our own time. Just as those early humans used stone to inscribe their worldview, we use silicon circuits and digital code. Our era and theirs are bound by the same impulse: to leave behind durable records of knowledge that might outlast us. AI, in this sense, acts as the interpreter bridging two epochs of human communication. It has taken the coded expressions of one age and translated them into terms comprehensible to another. The decoding is not only a triumph of archaeology, but a metaphor for the continuity of human intelligence across millennia. Another profound realization comes from the recognition that Göbekli Tepe's builders were not an isolated people. The AI detected parallels between their symbols and those found in later Neolithic sites scattered across Europe and Asia. This suggests that symbolic systems traveled far beyond the plateau of southeastern Turkey, carried by migrations and cultural exchanges. Göbekli Tepe may therefore represent a cultural seedbed whose ideas radiated outward, influencing societies over vast distances. The AI's discovery positions the site not just as a local wonder, but as a nexus of global human development. The decoding also sheds light on how humans first conceived of time. By linking symbols to celestial cycles, Göbekli Tepe's builders were effectively inventing calendars. They were embedding into stone a shared system for reckoning the seasons, predicting celestial events, and perhaps even synchronizing social gatherings. This early codification of time may have been one of humanity's greatest intellectual leaps, giving structure to collective life. The AI's recognition of these patterns forces us to acknowledge that the roots of our modern concept of time may lie deep within those ancient carvings. The revelations continue to ripple outward into anthropology, philosophy, and even cognitive science. If Göbekli Tepe's symbols encode layered meaning in ways akin to language, then the cognitive capacity for symbolic abstraction was far more advanced in that era than previously believed. The builders were not only thinking symbolically, but doing so in structured, repeatable patterns that resemble syntax. This suggests that language and symbolic thought were not emergent properties of later urban cultures, but deeply ingrained features of the human mind long before. Even more fascinating is the idea that Göbekli Tepe functioned as a unifying force. In a world of scattered bands of foragers, such a monumental site would have required cooperation across wide regions. The shared symbolic system carved into stone provided a universal language of participation. Regardless of dialect or tribal differences, anyone who approached the site could engage with its carvings through shared myth and astronomical knowledge. In this way, Göbekli Tepe may have been humanity's first great experiment in collective identity, uniting diverse groups under common symbols carved in stone. The AI's decoding also brings into focus the resilience of knowledge. Written text can be burned, oral traditions can fade, but stone endures. The builders of Göbekli Tepe may have recognized this, intentionally embedding their worldview into the most durable medium available to them. By decoding the carvings, AI has confirmed that their efforts succeeded. 11,000 years later, their symbolic system remains intelligible. Humanity's first attempt at creating a permanent archive has, against all odds, reached across the gulf of time to speak once more. The revelations of Göbekli Tepe also invite us to reconsider the relationship between science and spirituality. The site does not appear to distinguish sharply between the two. Astronomy, myth, ritual, and symbolic communication were woven into a single whole. The builders did not separate practical observation from spiritual meaning, but saw them as inseparable aspects of reality. In our own age, where science and spirituality are often seen as opposed, Göbekli Tepe offers a reminder of a time when knowledge and meaning were unified, when mapping the stars was also an act of reverence. Artificial intelligence, in making this unity visible again, provides more than archaeological data. It offers us an encounter with the origins of our own intellectual and spiritual traditions. The carvings of Göbekli Tepe show us that from the very beginning, humans have sought not only to survive, but to understand, to encode, and to share meaning. The fact that AI can read those symbols now is itself part of the same story. The story of an intelligent species forever reaching beyond its immediate horizon toward the infinite. The revelation of Göbekli Tepe's decoded symbols did more than challenge timelines. It opened a gateway into exploring how humans first constructed meaning at a civilizational scale. Once AI made sense of the carved motifs, it became apparent that the site was more than a place of observance or performance. It was a laboratory of ideas, where early societies experimented with encoding human experience into durable symbols. What emerges is a portrait of humanity not as passive dwellers in a harsh environment, but as visionaries actively shaping their world through abstract thought. The decoding indicated that Göbekli Tepe's builders had a deep concern with cycles, both cosmic and earthly. By mapping animals and abstract shapes to seasonal events, they created a rhythm of existence that linked daily survival to cosmic order. This connection suggests that early humans were already striving to place themselves within a continuum of time and nature. Such efforts imply not only intellectual sophistication, but also a shared cultural anxiety, the desire to find certainty in the unpredictable. The carvings, therefore, served as both reassurance and instruction. Reassurance that life followed an intelligible order, and instruction on how to align one's community with those rhythms. The findings also prompt reflection on the scale of cooperation needed to build Göbekli Tepe. Moving multi-ton pillars, carving detailed reliefs, and arranging them in precise formations required a degree of organization that seems astonishing for groups traditionally described as hunter-gatherers. The AI's decoding revealed symbolic sequences that could only make sense in the context of collective interpretation. This means that entire groups had to be educated in the symbolic code, sustaining shared meanings across generations. Such a project presupposes stable social bonds and, critically, leadership structures capable of coordinating labor. The site thus becomes evidence that social complexity did not wait for farming villages. It was already manifest in symbolic and ritual undertakings. Another striking element of the AI's analysis is the relationship between architecture and cognition. The stone circles were not arranged randomly. Their layouts formed nested spaces that guided movement, restricted sightlines, and framed certain carvings in deliberate ways. The builders were orchestrating not only the physical environment, but also the cognitive experience of participants. In modern terms, Göbekli Tepe was engineered as an immersive environment that shaped how people thought and felt within it. The pillars became not merely stones, but agents of meaning, directing attention and orchestrating collective consciousness. Such architectural intentionality reveals a level of psychological awareness in these early societies that scholars had not previously attributed to them. The decoded symbols also highlight how humans first engaged with abstraction. Many of the carvings are not direct depictions of reality, but stylized forms that compress complex ideas into simple shapes. The so-called H motif, for instance, may represent duality or connection, serving as a symbolic shorthand for concepts too abstract to be pictured directly. This abstraction demonstrates a crucial cognitive leap, the ability to use symbols not only to record what is seen, but to capture ideas, relationships, and principles. The AI's recognition of such motifs provides evidence that Göbekli Tepe was a crucible of abstract thinking, pushing humanity toward more advanced symbolic systems. The implications of abstraction extend into how humans conceived of themselves. The anthropomorphic carvings, some headless, others stylized to emphasize arms or hands, suggest that identity was already being explored through symbolic reduction. Rather than portraying realistic portraits, the builders chose to distill human form into elemental parts, emphasizing function or concept over likeness. This may have been an early attempt to grapple with identity, mortality, and the essence of what it means to be human. That such concerns are encoded into stone at this early date reinforces the idea that existential reflection is not a late development, but a foundational human trait. The AI's decoding also illuminates how early societies integrated environment and cosmology. Many carvings correspond to animals that held ecological significance in the region. Foxes, snakes, vultures, and wild boars were not only symbolic but also real presences in the daily lives of these people. By inscribing these animals into stone, the builders were binding ecological knowledge into their symbolic system. This dual role, practical and spiritual, meant that the carvings preserved ecological memory as well as cosmological meaning. In this way, Göbekli Tepe functioned as both a mythological archive and an environmental manual, encoding survival strategies alongside cosmic narratives. Furthermore, the site challenges our understanding of memory itself. Oral traditions can only extend as far as memory and storytelling allow, but the carvings at Göbekli Tepe extended memory into material form. They were not stories told by elders around a fire, but permanent records inscribed into stone, accessible to anyone who could interpret the symbols. This transition from ephemeral oral memory to lasting symbolic record marks a pivotal moment in human history: the externalization of thought into durable media. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe anticipates the very idea of information storage centuries before clay tablets and papyrus scrolls appeared. The AI analysis also pointed toward an intentional layering of meanings. Each carving could operate on multiple levels: literal depiction, symbolic archetype, cosmological marker, and social signifier. For example, a carved boar could be simultaneously a representation of local fauna, a symbol of strength or ferocity, a marker of a seasonal constellation, and a totem associated with specific groups. This polyvalence ensured that the carvings could resonate across audiences, sustaining relevance even as cultural context shifted. It also demonstrates an early mastery of semiotic complexity, suggesting that the builders deliberately crafted symbols to carry layered meanings that transcended simple communication. The decoding also reshaped interpretations of ritual practice at the site. Certain sequences of carvings appear to form narratives, mythological cycles enacted in stone. These sequences may have been recited, performed, or reenacted during gatherings. In this way, Göbekli Tepe functioned as a script, a stage, and an archive all at once. Participants were not merely observers but active performers within a symbolic framework, reliving the encoded myths through ritual. Such practices would have reinforced communal bonds while transmitting cosmological knowledge in embodied form. Another profound dimension of the discovery is its challenge to the concept of prehistory. Prehistory is usually defined by the absence of written records. Yet Göbekli Tepe's decoded carvings blur that boundary. While not writing in the conventional sense, they are structured symbolic records capable of transmitting knowledge across generations. If writing is broadly understood as the durable encoding of human thought, then Göbekli Tepe represents a form of proto-literacy that pushes back the origins of recorded communication by several millennia. This forces scholars to rethink the neat separation between prehistory and history, suggesting a more gradual continuum of symbolic recording. The site also reveals humanity's earliest attempts at universality. Unlike later writing systems tied to specific languages, Göbekli Tepe's symbols were designed to be understood visually, independent of spoken dialects. This universality made them accessible across diverse groups, uniting different communities under shared symbols. In this sense, the site represents humanity's first step toward creating a shared symbolic language that transcended local differences. Such universality would have been crucial in fostering cooperation among varied groups in a pre-urban world. AI's decoding also has implications for the philosophy of technology. Just as Göbekli Tepe's builders externalized knowledge into stone, we externalize knowledge into digital code. The parallels are striking. Both represent humanity's attempt to extend memory, stabilize meaning, and transmit knowledge beyond the limits of individual lifespans. In both cases, technology is not separate from culture but integral to it, shaping how humans conceive of themselves and their place in the cosmos. The decoding therefore becomes a mirror, showing us that the impulse to create external systems of knowledge is not new, but ancient, embedded in the very roots of human civilization. Another layer of significance lies in the recognition of intentional ambiguity within the symbols. AI analysis suggested that some motifs were deliberately left open to multiple interpretations. Such ambiguity would have allowed different groups to engage with the carvings according to their own cultural frameworks while still participating in a shared symbolic system. This intentional openness reflects a sophisticated understanding of communication, one that anticipates modern ideas about polyvalence and interpretive flexibility. The builders were not simply carving fixed messages, but creating symbols robust enough to adapt across audiences and contexts. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on AI decoding Göbekli Tepe's mysterious symbols? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.